Hi everyone, real quick, this video assumes that you have read Victor LaValle's Destroyer. It's linked in the description. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend pausing the video now, taking a look at all that, and then coming back here and watching the video. Baseball. It's an all-American sport, the quintessential experience of a young American boy's life. A sport enjoyed by all ages. A major carrier for themes of institutional racism and used to characterize the world of Victor LaValle's Destroyer. As a multi-billion-dollar industry, baseball... Wait, what? Let's back up a second. Victor LaValle is an American writer who, through Boom Studios, published his graphic novel Destroyer in 2017. A modern retelling of Frankenstein, it follows the African-American descendant of Victor Frankenstein in her quest to bring her son back to life and exact vengeance on the forces that took him away from her in the first place. Akai Baker is killed by a racist cop on the way back home after baseball practice. There's a pretty clear connection between the two, but first, before we can talk about the intersection between the two, we really need to discuss the original Frankenstein. Racism plays a central role in how Frankenstein's monster is characterized, and it represents many of the racial struggles of the past. As author H.L. Malchow, in his essay Frankenstein's Monster and Images of Race in 19th Century Britain puts it, quote, "The monster, it will be seen, is not merely a grotesque, a too roughly cobbled together simulacrum of a man. He is, first, larger and more powerful than his maker, and secondly, dark and sinister in appearance. This suggests the standard description of the black man in both the literature of the West Indies and that of West African exploration." As Malchow states, the description of the monster is very in line with civilizing mission as descriptions of the white man's burden. Even very progressive views of race at the time painted Africans as possessing immense physical prowess, but needing to be helped in order to become the equal of the white man in terms of mental reasoning. It bleeds into a lot of the writing of the time period as well as we see with Frankenstein. While this is certainly true of the characterization in Frankenstein, what about in Destroyer? Dr. Baker, one of our main characters that we follow through every volume of this story, is not a particularly physically imposing character. Neither is Akai, her resurrected son. They remain frightening, given Akai's transformation into an immortal nanomachine god of disassembly, and Dr. Baker's incredible dedication to vengeance and her penchant for creating incredibly advanced machines, but it doesn't really stem from a place of physical prowess. Realistically, there's only one African-American character that we see be physically intimidating. Pliers, Akai's father and Dr. Baker's husband. However, in his most intimidating incarnation, after being fused to the machine known as the Bride, which is also a very interesting thing to talk about, but I really do need to get to my main point here, Pliers is removed of his race. He's put into a massive metal machine that he can never leave, and all elements of his humanity are stripped away as he is left a machine to fulfill a purpose. There's no way to actually assign a race to Pliers after his transformation, and as such, LaValle renders him raceless, essentially, in his composition of his story. Coming back here from a bit of a tangent, this is a video about baseball, right? Where's the baseball? As I mentioned earlier, Akai plays baseball. He clearly likes the sport. Look at the way the illustrators Dietrich Smith and Joanna Lafuente drew him. And sure, this could just be LaValle grabbing one of the most popular American sports to make his point, but I think he's intentionally chosen baseball because of the racial history of the sport, where racism is very direct in its influence. As Robert Nowatzki wrote in his article Foul Lines in the Color Line, Baseball and Race at the Turn of the 20th Century, quote, "These mythical qualities that white Americans gave baseball have also been associated with whiteness in the West for centuries. This whiteness can literally be seen on baseball diamonds. Home plate, the bases, the pitching rubber, the foul lines and batter's box, and even the ball are white. On a symbolic level, when the 1919 Chicago White Sox were dubbed the Black Sox after throwing the World Series, their nickname implied the innocence of whiteness and the wickedness of blackness, even though all the guilty players were of European descent. America, both as a country and as a system of power, has always fought to keep minorities away from the means of power. From chattel slavery and the Civil War to Jim Crow, segregation, and incarceration, the American system has never been lenient on African Americans. Even beyond political systems that black people were kept out of, the segregation of sports played a major role in their oppression. African Americans had to break into the main conversation of sports, with famous players like Moses Walker and Jackie Robinson fighting tooth and nail to play in the major league and be paid equally for their skill. Being blocked out of the public eye and pushed to the corners of society further enables this oppression, as it is often forgotten and overlooked once not shoved in your face. Moving back into the world of Destroyer, Akai Baker represents this in the story. When Dr. Baker laments her belief that she'd finally made it to the top and away from the racial oppression she'd fought as a child, she expresses it through her son getting into a good white school. Instead, she's torn back down to square one with the realization that the oppressive forces of white supremacy can still reach her. And this, to me, is the central reason that LaValle picked baseball as the sport Akai plays. Even though they live in a white neighborhood, and even though he attends a white school, and even though he plays the whitest sport, a target is still put on his back as a result of his blackness. The never-ending reminder of the racial hierarchy in America is enforced through every aspect of a Kai's life, even down to his forms of recreation. LaValle uses this to leverage the dystopian style of his setting, sure, but even more so to remind us of the reality of our world. By using such a centerpiece of American culture, he reminds us that we still have a long way to go for racial equality.